Blanca Estela Blanco. My birthday is September 8th, 1951, and I was born in San Antonio, Texas. My parents were Otto and Estela Mesa, M-E-S-A, and primarily I was raised by my grandmother, which was my father's mother, since I was a baby. I can't even remember when I just remember her holding me as a little baby in her arms, and since that time she was my mother. My mother and father moved to California when I was very young, and so she just was charged with the responsibility of raising me, and she did, I think, a pretty good job. Her name was Minnie Herminia Birmingham Mesa, M-E-S-A. One thing I remember about my grandmother, and she was, very adamant about it, is that she wanted me, her words were, always try to get ahead, always try to get ahead. And so those words stuck with me, so I was determined to get ahead, because in her speaking, that meant try to be successful or do the best that you can in school. All she wanted me to do was to graduate from high school. Back then, that was her goal for me. And I did that. And then I needed to move forward and decide what I needed to do in life. And of course, I supported her. I got a job. They came to interview at high school. Back then it was Southwestern Bell, and I wrote a little essay about me and my grandmother. And in that essay I said, I take responsibility of helping my grandmother so that we can live a comfortable life. My grandmother raised me on $75 a month. That's how she raised me. She was a dependent of my uncle Frank, who was a military man, and he put her as a dependent, and we'd get a $75 check, and with that we lived on. So after I graduated from high school, I thought, I need to help. Well, I was already helping my grandmother at a very young age. I was paying her bills. I was I guess maybe 14, 15 years old, going to the store, paying the utilities, all that kind of stuff. So I became very responsible at a very young age. And then when I got a job at Southwestern Bell as remember back then, a telephone operator. I was an information operator. And the job was a good paying job. And so, it paid the bills, but I couldn't stand just being cooped. I felt like I was cooped up in a job, even though it was a good job. And it just wasn't me, it just wasn't for me, but I continued it until I could. And then I finally got out of it. And so I just moved on in my life. I was young. I was like 18, 19 years old. And so I knew there was other possibilities for me. I just had to keep looking. She had a very strong personality, and what she said went. And and if I didn't mind, sacaba la chancla, she would do that. And she was very strong. She told me if I'd go out, I'd have to be home by midnight. And she was there waiting for me at the door, when I'd come home. And, so she was very strict on me. And I think because she was, that influenced my life a lot. And she died when I was 21 years old. And this is all taking place in San Antonio. And she told me before she passed away, she said, look, and she told me this in Spanish, I already taught you right from wrong. I told you the right way, and I told you what's the wrong way, or what's the wrong road. So now at 21 years old, it's up to you to decide what road you're going to choose. And I was very mediosa, I didn't want to get involved in anything that was, I was one of those that I had to, do what my grandmother said. Even after she died, I still remember the things that she'd tell me to, do the right thing and keep on the right road. And so, back then when I was a teenager, 21, there was a lot of drugs going on and what have you. And I was just afraid of that, because I didn't want to go out of my head at any time and not know what I was doing. So I was very careful. Even though I was a teenager, I wouldn't make sure that, I had to maintain my job because I wanted to make sure that I had my apartment, I paid my car, I had the clothes I wanted and what have you, and I did. And so it was her that influenced me quite a bit. And I knew that after she was gone, it was all up to me to make it in this world. My grandmother was, well, in the political sense, she was Democrat, for sure. Born a Democrat, always a Democrat. She was Catholic. She told me you'll never be in anything else other than a Catholic, and that stayed. And so, my grandmother worked really hard. She was raised in the area of out there in Rosenberg, and she picked cotton. She was a cotton picker, because the way she would say it was, trabajaba en los labores. Cuando trabajábamos en los labores, she'd say. And I remember she told me that when they fed her, she'd have to get the food from the back door of the house. They wouldn't let her go to the front or go get the food. She had to go and get food from the back of the house. That's how they fed them. And she worked really, really hard in those fields. And I'll never forget that, she led a hard life. And then, of course, she married my grandfather, Frank Birmingham Mesa. And Frank Mesa. And he was a truck driver. And he got in a very terrible accident, and he was paralyzed from the waist down. And so it was up to her to take care of him. And she, back then we didn't have automatic washers and dryers. She had to do it by hand. And she worked really hard to make sure that, he was taken care of. So my grandmother, raised, I think 6, 7 kids of her own, plus one of 2 before her marriage to my grandfather. And so I say that she was one of these women that was, in her own right, she was a very independent woman, and she took care of the household. So I commend my grandmother for doing that, and she taught me some good values and characteristics that, I probably still live them today, because of her. But she was the kind of lady that she had brothers and sisters, and she was very family oriented. And every Sunday, my uncle, which is my father's brother, Charlie we'd call him, he'd come and pick her up, and she'd go pick up pan dulce every Sunday and take it over to her brother's house, which he was an older brother. And I remember they'd sit there at the table and eat pan dulce and drink coffee and, talk, about the family and what have you. And so that was her outing. She was very family oriented. She wanted to be with her brothers, and that's what they would do. Back then that was the custom. You go over someone's house, you take pan dulce or something. You never go to someone's house empty-handed, right? That was the the custom, back then. But I must say that she was very adamant about being Catholic, and of course she was Democrat, and I know that she probably voted that way. And so, because, Democrats took care of los pobres, that's what she'd say. Birmingham, it was her mother's marriage to a gentleman by the name of Birmingham. So, I need to look it up. I've tried. Birmingham is an English name. And so her mother married somebody, and I don't know him, but it was a Birmingham. And that was, her name. I can't remember my great-grandmother's name, but, and they were raised out in Rosenberg, Texas, out there like close to Yoka, Minez, and all those places out there near Houston. And then I did try to look them up on the census for one of my aunts that was a Birmingham as well. That was from a previous. But it's funny because my grandmother had twins, Leonard and Lillian. And all I could find was my uncle's, which was my father's brother, stepbrother, all I could find was a birth certificate for my uncle and not for my aunt Lillian, which is really odd because they were twins. I just couldn't find it anywhere. And so I don't know if they didn't record her birth, or they said they were twins, so they must have been born together. But anyway, those are things that are really, really missing in our Latino community, that the records were not processed properly. I mean, like maybe they didn't care. I mean, they didn't care for our community, so they did things that were kind of, you know, lopsided or lackadaisical, like they just didn't write everything down. And that's a missing for us. That's a missing for our community. That wasn't taken care of.
And so how did the family end up in San Antonio?
I would think that it's probably job related, or you know, I think that they just migrated that direction, I would think. My grandmother never really said how we ended up in San Antonio, but that's where I grew up most of my young life until I hit about 27, 30 years old, and I moved to Houston. You know, I had a lot of good memories because that's where I was raised, and we were poor, but we weren't lacking for anything. You know, I want you to know that we didn't feel like we were hungry. We didn't feel like we were cold. We had a roof over our heads. We had what we needed. We just didn't have a lot of luxuries, which, you know, I didn't see that missing as a young child because that wasn't my interest back then. But now I look back and say, wow, you know, we were poor and we didn't realize it. But I wasn't so poor that we didn't have what we needed. We had the essentials. That was what was important to us back then. As long as we could eat our bologna sandwiches on mayonnaise, we were happy. I went to, when my uncle bought a house on actually the east side of San Antonio, which was right off of W.W. White Road. It's a brick home, you know. To me, the house looked really big. We went back to look at it, my husband and I, several years ago, and the house was really pretty small. So we went to look at it. I mean, I went to school there at a Home Green Elementary, and it was an all-white school that I remember. I got in there in either 4th or 5th grade, and I went through elementary, junior high school, then I went to high school. And we went to school with a lot of, you know, white kids. And they knew that we were Mexicans or Mexicanos. And so I felt that my feeling was, why weren't they friends with me? Why wouldn't they be friends with me? And it seems as though like I never felt good enough as they were, because, you know, I felt like I wasn't as smart as them. I was always trying to catch up, but I was, because they put me, as I moved on into junior high school, I went to Jeff Davis Junior High School there, right next to the elementary school. And they put me in accelerated classes, or college-bound classes, they would call them. So I was in with all of them, but because I had a Hispanic last name, I just felt like I wasn't treated the same, you know. And you know, it was, I couldn't speak the Spanish, because if I would, they'd send me to the principal's office back then. And so consequently, I lost a lot of my Spanish. So I had to relearn my Spanish. And so it was, I tried to make friends. There were some friends I did have, but most of them, there was only a handful of Hispanics there. There weren't a lot of us, so we all kind of hung together. And all my cousins went to school there, so we hung together. And so, and there were some Anglo girls that became friends with us, but not the ones that were like that clique group that everybody, they were the smart ones, they were the ones, and they just didn't want to let us in for some reason. And back then, I didn't realize that it was discrimination. Back then, I thought it was, they just didn't like me, or I wasn't smart enough, or I wasn't like them. but not because, not because, and it wasn't because I wasn't smart enough, or it was because I was Hispanic or I was Latina. That was the whole gist of it.
By your name,
Wanna
tell
pause
by
it?
your name.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I need to blow my nose. Give me a napkin. Yeah, I want to tell you about what happened in the second grade for me. I was sent to a Catholic school, and my name, back then, my real name is Blanca Estela. And when I got to the school, the nuns changed my name to Blanche. They went from Blanca to Blanche. So that name I carried, Blanche, all the way into high school. On my driver's license, on everything. And little did I know that that was not my name. I thought my name was Blanche this whole time. But because they wanted to change it to English and integrate me into the, Anglo community, they did that. And, my grandmother didn't disagree with them. They thought that that's what, the teachers knows best, and that she did what she thought they were right. So I found out later when and I'll tell you about this later on, when I got hired by the airlines, I had to actually go get my birth certificate and present it to them. And then I realized at that time that my name is really Blanca Estela. And it is not Blanche. And at that time, I was 27 years old.
Wow.
That I changed everything, my license, everything back to my real name. But it took me this long to figure that out. And why they changed my name, I can only imagine. Did they do it just to make it easier for them, or did they do it because they wanted to integrate me and discriminate against because my name was Blanca? I mean, that's a question I'll never get answered, but I can only imagine.
How did that feel when you read your name?
I was like in shock. I said, "What? My real name is Blanca. I mean, that is my name." That's how I felt. And I said, all these years, and you know what? I never even liked the name Blanche. I hated the name Blanche. Because it was some star, some celebrity on some show that was named Blanche. It was like some lady that, I don't know. I just never liked the name. And when I saw that my name was Blanca, I said, oh my God, thank God for miracles, because my real, and so, yes, I felt like they wanted me to do away with my culture. And I, thank God, got it back. So,
Wow.
yeah. And I'm sure that a lot of young Latinas and young Latinos nowadays, back then, that was done to them as well. So I wasn't probably the only one. They did it to a lot of kids. So can you imagine? I mean, I went through my life not liking my name. And there are other folks that they probably just keep it because that's what they know. And they go on through life to it. But I thank God that got revealed to me, that my real name is Blanca.
That's an
Yeah.
incredible story.
Yeah.
Did your grandmother call you Blanche or Blanca?
No.
Or mijita?
No, mi amiguita, más mijita, and I had a nickname, and so, that's what they called me. She didn't call me Blanche.
Yeah.
But that was the name I wrote down every time in school, all through elementary, junior high, and high school. So.
And going back to school, you mentioned students. Was it also when you were in the public school? Was it also teachers or that were treating you differently, or did you feel it just from students?
Um, um, I had a few teachers. I went and enrolled myself in Spanish as an elective course, and the type of Spanish that they were teaching was not the Spanish that I spoke at home. They were speaking more of a Castilian Spanish. I said, this is not the Spanish I speak at home. I speak different, you know? And so I passed the course, and the teacher seemed to like me. And she was a Latina teacher. But, and then I had a really good math teacher. His name was Mr. Bird, B-I-R-D. I'll never forget him. And I learned algebra with him because he explained the concepts so well. And I don't think those two teachers had any discriminatory attitude toward me, you know. But there were maybe some other teachers that felt that I wasn't, you know, up to par in some courses, you know. I mean, but I did perform. I performed well. I was a good typist. I learned how to type there. And that's, you know, that's where I learned all my skills in secretarial skills. I learned them all in school. So, you know, I got ahead, just like my grandmother wanted me to. I got ahead because I felt that I had the intelligence to get ahead. You know, there's some that, you know, maybe didn't have those opportunities that I got, thank God. I think there were just opportunities of miracles that happened in my life, and I'm thankful for that.
So tell me about life after high school. You graduate, you said from Jeff Davis.
Yeah, I graduated from Sam Houston High School.
Okay.
And I was, right after school, I went to work right away, you know, and started earning a living because I knew that if I didn't do it, I mean, my grandmother couldn't help me because, I mean, she was living on $75 a month still. So I had to, and I wanted a car, and so I had to go and support her. So that's what I did. You know, I used to come home and they'd pay me every 2 weeks, and I'd give my paycheck to my grandmother, and she'd give me money. She'd dole out money to me because she knew, like, I like to spend money, right? So, and back then, you know, I wanted clothes, and I had a good uncle, my Uncle Chale, that would, because remember, my parents were in California. So my father couldn't do all the things that my uncle would do for me, like he co-signed for my car, and he trusted me. He said, just don't let me down, you know, just pay your bills, and I did, because I didn't want my uncle to worry that I not pay my car and they'll come after him, or I wouldn't pay. He signed. Back then, I wanted a clothing store account at one of these stores called Learners. It was a teenage store, and you know, nice clothes for young girls, and they wouldn't give me one unless I'd have a co-signer, which was my uncle, and he did, and I'd pay that bill. And so I went to work right away. So needless to say, I didn't start college right away. I had jobs, and I got good jobs because I could type, and I could, and then I landed a job with a law firm in Laredo, Texas, and I learned to type. And well, I knew how to type, but I learned the legal secretarial field. And so then I moved back. That was just a few, 1 year or so that I was down in Laredo. And I worked for a furniture company. Then I went to work for that law firm. And but at the furniture company, I was working in the credit department, repoing furniture from people because they didn't pay their furniture bill. So I'd call them up, and I had to relearn my Spanish back then. Remember, I had lost my Spanish, so I learned some of it there. Then I went back to San Antonio. I was still young, and I got a job at a law firm. Then I was able to also make some money, law firm. So then, you know, even though my mother and father lived in California, I still wanted to please my parents, you know, do the best thing. My father wanted me to be an airline stewardess. So I applied. I applied to become an airline stewardess back then for Pan American Airways, and back then I was wearing the style of the hairstyle of the time, which was an afro, and I went and applied for Pan American Airways, and they told me no the first time. They said no. I said, okay, well, when can I apply again? I was determined I was going to get that job. I said, I'm going to get this job one way or another. He says, well, you can't apply for another 6 months. 6 months came around, I applied again, but this time I straightened my hair. You know, got it all straightened up, and I said, well, maybe they'll hire me now. So I walked in and I said, well, I applied 6 months ago and y'all told me no. And he said, you came back? I said, yes. Well, right away she sent me to her second interview. She says, this girl's determined, she's gonna get hired. And sure enough, I got hired as an airline stewardess for Pan Am. And the reason, not only did I do it for my father, but I also did it because I knew that my grandmother could not afford me to send me around the world. I wanted to travel and see other countries, and I said, well, what better way could I do it and get paid for it by getting hired by an airline company? So I did that, and I traveled around the world. They sent me to Hawaii for 5 weeks, and then I went to Osaka, Japan. Then I went all over the world, and I went to countries I would have never seen before. I'll never forget the first flight that I took on a Pan Am 707 jet. Remember, I don't know, they're old airplanes, very long. We went to Dublin, Ireland. And I remember opening that big old door from the airplane, and I looked out, and it was really green everywhere. And I said, well, that doesn't look any different than United States. And we were in Ireland, you know, so that was my surprise. I said, nothing's different in the world other than the cultures. That's all that's different in the world is our cultures. All the world looks the same. Some have mountains, some have green grass, some have deserts, some have big cities. But what's different is the culture of people. And that's how you learn. And in the airline business, you learn to be able to be with other cultures other than your own. So it was a learning experience for me. Besides, you know, sightseeing around the world, you know, meeting new people. Back then I lived in New York City. When I got through with my training in Hawaii from Pan Am, they based me out of New York City. Back then I was 27 years old. And I landed in JFK Airport not knowing anyone except the people that I had trained with, and they told me where to go. And you can't imagine a 27-year-old girl in a city as big as New York not knowing where to go, what train to take. I mean, it was scary. But somehow I muddled through it and got where I needed to go, set up my apartment, and and the saying is, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere, right? So that's what I felt that I did at that time. So I lived there for a while, and because I was based out of New York, I'd take I don't know if it was the A train or the E train to JFK Airport when they called me in, and I'd fly out and then come back a few, 2 or 3 or 4 days later. And it was a fun job what it lasted. However, I saw something in me that I felt, because I worked for law firms from that point in time, from the furniture company, then I went to law firms, and that's where I they paid well. Law firms paid very well for legal secretaries back then. And so when I got this job with Pan Am, which I really enjoyed. I mean, it was a fun job and got to see many countries around the world. I said, Blanca, you are losing your skills. That's what I thought to myself. You're not typing anymore. You're not in the legal field. You don't know how the legal field has changed, what documents are needed. And I was pretty good at that. And so I made the decision about 4 years later, after I traveled and to to resign from Pan Am and go back to the legal field. Because I knew, because unfortunately what you learn in the airlines is safety. In case plane goes down, you know what to do, and serving people, like a waitress in the sky. And I said, I don't want to retire from here and not know nothing else to do. I mean, I just felt like my skills weren't being honed in. So I resigned and went back to the law firms, and I got hired at Baker Botts, one of the most prestigious law firms in Houston. And I worked there, and then, you know, several years, and then I went to several different law firms, and then I became an independent legal secretary where firms would hire me when their secretaries were out or on vacation. I'd come in and step in because I knew the documentation that was needed. I knew how to type, and back then we had word processors. We didn't have these computers that we have today, and I knew how to run those. So, and that's what they needed, that type of experience. So really, I've been forging my own, you know, niches in the jobs that I have accomplished, because, you know, I made a niche for myself where people could just call me and I would go in and substitute for their secretary who was out. So that was awesome. So I did all that, and I worked 12 years as a legal secretary. And then somehow I don't remember when the thought occurred. It just like one of those types of, wow, you know, enlightenment that I got. I looked at a newspaper and I said, my God, all I'm reading is nothing but terrible news about all the Latinos, robberies, burglaries, this, that. I mean, no, I said, I don't see anything good in the newspaper about Hispanics. You know, they're not presenting us who we really are. We're not all these people that are doing all there. Maybe there is a segment, a small amount of people that are doing that, but what about the other people? What about the people that we represent? What are they doing? None of that was highlighted. And boom, Viva Magazine. I decided we need to have a magazine together. And I saw somebody put a magazine together, one of these magazines that was a 4-color front cover, and I decided what type of departments I wanted in the magazine. And next thing you know, I found a name. I checked with a lot of people in the community, and finally it just went clunk. Viva Magazine. Viva! So the magazine was created back in, if I can remember correctly, it was in either 90, 91. And I think I did my first 4-color front cover of one of a Tejano celebrity. And he sang, stop. Yeah, and you know, the first cover that I did of Viva Magazine was Ram Herrera. I had somebody paint that picture of Ram Herrera on the cover, and he was my first, because I figured he was very, very popular at that time, back in the 90s. And everybody, so we wrote a story about him. And I don't recall who wrote it, it's probably in the archives somewhere. But it was a very popular issue. And then I did that, I started the magazine doing it on a monthly basis. It cost me a lot of money. I had a rental home in San Antonio and I sold it. And with that money that I got, proceeds from that sale of that home, that's how I paid for the printing and everything I needed to do for the magazine. And it was a tough struggle to get the magazine going, because what I encountered was nobody wanted to advertise in Viva Magazine because it hadn't been out for a year yet. So these advertisers did not want to take a chance with me because they didn't want to waste their money. So I struggled in the advertising part of it. So I had to, you know, do the magazine, a lot of it from my own, you know, money that I had. And so I continued, and I did it on a monthly basis, and you know, I tried to find, I can't recall all the covers that I had, but they were really good, interesting covers of people. Most of the stories, especially the front cover magazine, was a rags to riches story of a Hispanic, just the way I imagined it in my mind was on the front cover would be a Hispanic that made it, that we are doing something in the community. We're not just doing these other bad things. We're doing good things for people to help our community. And that's why I did Viva Magazine the way I did it. A rags to riches story every time, every single month I'd do it. And then I happened to be a member of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and Dolores Guerrero and Carmen Horta and Cindy Garcia were friends of mine. And they found out that at that time, back in 91 or 92, that Houston Post was looking for a way to market the Hispanic community. They needed an in because they knew that the Hispanic community was growing, and they wanted something to get that readership and get that advertising dollars, because they had it. These Hispanic businesses had it. So they said, we have a perfect in for you. Viva Magazine. She's out there doing this publication. Why don't y'all put it in your magazine? So they figured out a way. We had a big meeting at their big, ivory tower out there on Southwest Freeway. And I went there, and I was totally intimidated because, little old me in there and with all these high-powered people, And so we talked, and they said, this is what we'd like. I think we can do a nice partnership with each other. And so they took it on. So Viva Magazine got circulated in the Houston Post every week. They wanted it to be weekly. So now, back then, it wasn't costing $10,000 a month, it was costing $10,000 a week. So every week, they provided the printing press. I did all the stories, and I took care of all of the photography, and I was out every single night. It was like, I was like a politician. I had to be out every single night because I was the only one covering events for Hispanic community. So I tried to cover all areas: politics, health, art, music. I tried to, community service. I mean, so many. And then I did a business of the week. My phone was clamoring. I mean, it wouldn't stop ringing. It was a constant thing. Everybody wanted to be on Viva Magazine. Everybody wanted to be business of the week. It was so popular. And so I did that, and the Houston Post they were really, really good to me. So I appreciate them, and I thank the Houston Hispanic Chamber of Commerce back then. And they named me Hispanic Businesswoman of the Year in 1992 because of the publication, because how I helped the community and help the community see that we have people in our culture doing some great things. So that's why I did Viva Magazine and try to present our community in a good light. I was very grateful because I wanted the magazine to continue. I really wanted it to continue forever, but I knew that the life of a publication wasn't going to last that long because it gets either outdated and what have you, and everybody was telling me to go to digital, but back then I just didn't have that expertise on how to do that. And so when the Houston Post went out of business back in 1990, well, actually it went out of business in 95, and I knew that. So my last issue was in 1994. That was the last issue right there, behind me. Oh, I think that Viva Magazine made a big difference. I think that a lot of the media wants to have Latinos in their in their publications, in their stories, because you can see it now, they're all, doing stories on people that have accomplished things. They're doing that. So I just think it's not enough, but I think, it's going to continue. I think that the more we become a greater minority, the more we're going to be depicted in it. And they're depicting us in a good light, the ones that are. So, I'm glad that we've made this progress. The Viva magazine was a labor of love for me. It was a love that I felt that I was doing something good for the community, and I wanted it to continue and have it be a legacy, but I didn't know how at the time. And when she called, it was like, wow, what an honor. So she came, I had them all stacked up back in the back in a box. And she came and she picked them all up and took them. And I figured they were all at University of Houston at the Department of Mexican American Studies. But little did I know that they were going to Houston Public Library. I didn't know that until I started looking it up, and they said, yeah, they're all archived at the Houston Public Library. I said, really? I didn't know that. So, yeah, that was such an honor for me. Everybody used the word Hispanic because that was like the word of the time at that time. Because when I would say Latino would be more on a political sense. That they'd use Latino for more politics, Latino politics. But Hispanic would be a more business type, word. So like businesses wanted to have Latinos. They wanted to have a token Latino in their organization, or black, or whatever. So they'd hire a Hispanic because I guess it was mandated that they do something like that, right? Diversity in the workplace. So they used Hispanic more than they used Latino, because Latino had I don't know if Latino had a negative connotation, but I like Latino better than Hispanic, I just do. But for some people that might have a negative connotation. I don't know why, because it kind of more a political word. Because I can see that now in the news media, they use Latinos quite a bit, especially in politics, yeah.
Growing up, what did you call yourself, or in your family, or your grandmother? Was that?
No, we were just Mexicanos.
Yeah. Okay.
We were just Mexicanos, that's what we were. I mean, that's what I see myself as, una Mexicana, born right here in the United States, because that's my culture. And I'm never going to do away with my culture. I mean, even though I guess they tried to maybe erase it or get rid of it, but no, I mean, I've always been there, and it'll always be a part of me. And my grandkids, that's why I send my grandkids to Ballet Folklorico, because I want them to know where they come from, and this is part of their culture. And they loved it. They loved Ballet Folklorico con Nelly Fraga.
Oh,
yeah. So they enjoyed it, and I want them to understand that that's who they are, not to forget who they are. Latino or Hispanic or whatever it is they want to call themselves, they need to have that base that they will never forget who they are.
Did you ever use the word Chicana or Chicano?
No. No, I've never used that word. Even though I think I am a Chicana because I'm born in the United States and have Mexican descent, but I never used the word Chicana. That has another political sense to me, Well, see, because I'm still on the path that my grandmother's always get ahead, always do what, try to always better yourself. And so I enrolled myself at Houston Community College, and I took all my basic courses there, and one by one I was working and going to school at night, and then I met my husband, and I was doing Viva, and I was going to school at night, taking one course here, one course there, and that's how I got through college. I mean, then finally got all my basics out of the way and transferred over to University of Houston. And then I started journalism. So that's, I did it backwards. I had Viva magazine first, then I went and got journalism school. So, and so then I learned how to write. So then as the magazine progressed, you will see that I have written some of the cover stories on there toward the latter part of Viva magazine, because back then I had to hire people because I really didn't have that training to be able to write a good story. And as I learned through my courses, I did learn how to write a good story. And I do write still. I'm just a little rusty, but I can, you know, probably brush up on it if I need to. But I changed careers, and because I figured out, as you know, Viva magazine was a labor of love. You know, I didn't make a lot of money. It was a successful magazine. However, I figured just journalists don't make a lot of money unless you're way at the top, and these people either have to resign or go away or, you know, terminate, whatever, to make that kind of money. I mean, big money. And I said, there's just not, because I met a journalist and I asked him, how much money are you making over here at the Post or the Chronicle? And he said, oh, I make about $12,000. I said, that's all? I said, oh, that's not enough, you know. So, you know, I said, you know what, maybe a career in business would be much better. And so I went to, so I graduated, I got a Bachelor's of Science in Business and Finance, and then I went on a year later and got my Master's in Business Administration. And, you know, with the support of my husband, Freddie, he helped me a lot, you know, because he took care of, you know, whatever else I couldn't do in the household, he did it for me. And I mean, he was a great, great man to have. I mean, because, you know, you need that kind of support. You need spousal support in order to advance your goals, and he did that for me. After I closed Viva magazine down in 1995, I didn't know what to do. You know, I was going to school, I didn't have my degrees, and what am I going to do now? And somebody told me, says, Blanca, you're a good salesperson. I mean, in order to have a magazine like you had, I mean, you had to be somebody that would be able to, you know, sell something. And I said, yeah, okay. So I went to work right here at SCI, Service Corporation International, offering services for funeral arrangements and cemetery property. And I didn't know the first thing about it. I went over there, they hired me, like, I think if I hope SCI doesn't get angry at me. I said if I fogged up the mirror, they'd hire you. You know, because they would just, I said, I came home real excited. I told my husband, I said, they hired me. And he said, well, how much are they going to pay you? And I said, well, I'm on commission. He says, that's no money. You got to go sell something. But, you know, I became very successful in that job. I made a lot of money. And, I mean, good money, I say, for myself. And, I mean, and then I moved up in the ranks. It's not all about the money. I was also doing a service for people. You know, I mean, it was a service-oriented, everybody needs that service, and I provided it. And because of that, I got compensated really, really well for it. But I moved up in the ranks. I went to, as just a salesperson that I walked in and fogged up the mirror, to a manager, managing a cemetery and moving up. And then I made a decision in the airlines, I made a decision in this particular job, because I had been there 6 years already at SCI, moved up in management and what have you. And I said, do I really want to do this for the rest of my life? Unfortunately, it's a good service for people, and people need it, but it's very sad. You know, you just had to talk to people about, you know, their demise and what have you, and a lot of people don't want to talk about that. But it's something people need, obviously. So I decided I don't think I want to do this forever. So I decided that, well, I gotta, I'm working on a degree in finance. Well, a friend of mine invited me to go interview with her. She was gonna go interview for this financial position. I went with her just to accompany her. So I went over to her. It was at the Post Oak Hotel up there on San Felipe, and we went. They had a big conference, and they were recruiting people, and they handed me a packet. And so I took the packet, but I wasn't there for that packet. I was just there to accompany her, and that's it, and go home. And she said, okay. So that's what she wanted to do. I said, okay. So I came home and I dropped the packet on my desk, and there it lay for months and months. And then one day I picked it up and I said, well, let me look at this. And I said, maybe I'll just fill it out. And I filled it out. And lo and behold, they called me and they said, we want to hire you. And I said, really? Well, this was being for a financial advisor for a large financial firm. And so I went ahead and took the job, and I got out of SCI and went to financial field, and here I am 18 years later. I'm a financial advisor, and I've been that for 18 years. And so, and then in that vein, I also do a lot of community work. I've gotten myself involved, but I have a real passion for, doing community work and serving the community. Recently, I had the honor of putting together a concert for LULAC Council 60. It's called, I did For the Love of Linda concert. And it was a tribute to Linda Ronstadt, Canciones de mi Padre. And the person that sang was Melinda Hernandez's sister. And she put on a fabulous show. We had it at Talento Bilingüe. And I coordinated the whole event. I actually chaired the event, to be honest with you. And I had a committee of folks, of course, that helped me along the way. We were a very successful committee. And it was a great concert. We sold out at Talento Bilingüe. We raised net $21,000 for that concert, for scholarships for LULAC Council 60. So I was very pleased, but that I found that that's where my passion is, doing that kind of work, doing that. I don't know what you call it. Do you call it being a concert promoter or being a conference? I don't know. I can do all of that. I can put things together. That's where I get satisfaction. Mm-hmm. That's where, because my job is to be with people. And that's what I enjoy most of all. That's why I enjoyed Viva Magazine, because I was always with people. And not that I say that my 18 years as financial advisor isn't a passion. Where I enjoy my job the most is when I'm with people. Like when I'm sitting in front of them. That's when I get my joy, when I know that I'm going to help them in something. That's the joy I have. I belong to other organizations, East End Alliance. We put on programs. We're a women's advocacy group. We put on panels on domestic abuse for women. We put on panels, political panels, getting out the vote. We do phone banking for candidates during the election year. We do immigration, health care. So different panels for the community to be informed. So, and I think that's something that I really enjoy doing, being involved in the community. I think that's my passion. I think the thing that was most challenging for me was Viva Magazine, and it was the most rewarding. And not to say that the others were not challenging, because everything that one does in life is a challenge, because that's where you learn. You learn by the challenges that you overcome. And every organization, even the Love of Linda, had some challenges, but we overcame them. And even the Eastern Alliance had some challenges, and we overcame them. So you learn by all the challenges and overcoming them, because those are lessons learned. And so Viva was the most challenging because I had a deadline. Every week, every month, I had a deadline, and you had to come up with something. You had to produce that magazine on time, otherwise the presses would go on without you. So it was challenging. And the hardest part about it was, and I remember crying because nobody wanted to advertise. That was challenging because I had to prove myself first. Then they would advertise. That was difficult. I remember them telling me, I'm sorry, big old marketing firms, how long have you been in business? Oh, several months, not even a year. Oh, well, you have to be in business, a year or two before we start advertising in your magazine. I said, okay, thank you very much. And then I'd go on to the next one, and then the next one, until I get a yes from somebody. So it was challenging, but I didn't give up. The thing about any type of project you take on, you cannot give up. What you just got to do is overcome the challenges and keep going. It's just something that you learn. It's a learning experience every single time. And so, even in organizations, you learn, because not every person in the committee is going to see it your way. So you got to overcome that challenge. Make sure that you have the buy-in from the committee members. So that's challenging in itself, because everybody is a different individual, and sometimes you get tough ones, and you get some ones that go with you and some ones that don't. So, but that's the nature of people, and that's what makes everything, as I say, that's what makes the world go around. Is different personalities and different people, and it's just the way you handle it. In the financial field, it's a male-dominated field. There's not a lot of women. So in this arena, you have to prove yourself not only to the men around you that I feel like they think they know more than you do, but we're all trained the same, so we get the same training they get. But I think that women have a larger challenge, because not only do they have to prove that they know their material, or they know what they're talking about, they have to, where I don't think the men have as much compassion as we do. So I think I am better equipped to handle a woman investor than a man is. Because why? Because I've heard several women tell me, well, I had an advisor, but I don't understand what he's saying because he talks over my head. So what I've tried to put in perspective is talk to her as if we're having a conversation, and explaining the hard, difficult concepts the financial world has. Mm-hmm. And so if I can make them understand what we're investing in, and I educate them, they will be better clients, and they will understand and be happier. And if the market rises and falls, they understand why it's rising and falling, because that's what markets do. And so I try to educate my clients, especially the women, because I don't think men do that well enough, especially in the financial field. They seem to talk over women sometimes, not talk over them, but talk in a way that is probably, it's like doctors speak. When the doctor talks, he speaks, you want him to speak your language, not doctor language. And that's sometimes what men financial advisors do. They talk in financial talk rather than talk in our language that we can understand. Because it's so important that the client understands, especially women, what they're investing in. It makes them feel better, makes them feel more secure, it makes them feel you're taking care of them. And that's the important thing. Well, in the airlines, no. I mean, we had all kind of different flight attendants.
Okay.
Yeah. So we weren't, because I chose Pan Am because Pan Am you would fly international, first of all, and I wanted to fly around the world. Second of all, you needed to have another language in order to get hired.
Ooh,
Yeah.
okay.
So the requisite was to speak. Well, I spoke Spanish, so you had to have two languages, English and another language, in order to get hired by Pan Am. In the magazine publishing, there were other magazines that were, or newspapers that were published by a woman here in Houston. So no, I wasn't the only one, except that Viva Magazine was the only magazine that, I wasn't a newspaper, like a News Today, at the Second News. We're a second story newspaper. In other words, I picked up stories that were front headline news and did second day stories, afterwards, get the other details in there. So I wasn't, and then of course I was a magazine, not a newspaper. And there were other women that in the black community, and they were here in the Hispanic community, they were publishing newspapers. They were actually doing news stories where I wasn't doing news stories. So no, I didn't experience any discriminatory in that area, because I think that women by that time were coming in their own. They were becoming recognized, let's say. Well, certainly I want to be remembered by someone that wanted to make a difference in the community. Somebody that did something that the community could be proud of, that I provided something that they could use for themselves, transform themselves. If she can do it, I can do it too. Something that would leave young women that says, hey, she did that, I can do that as well. If I could leave that legacy and make a difference for one young lady or one person, whoever that may be, I feel like I got my job accomplished.